Doug Wright, covering Utah's biggest stories, breaking Utah's biggest stories on KSL News Radio.
Welcome back to our Democratic gubernatorial debate here at KSL News Radio. You can watch this. It's streaming at kslnewsradio.com. Our thanks to Von Cook and Mike Weinholtz joining us, and our thanks also to our sponsor of this debate, the Utah Women's Democratic Club, the oldest continuous women's Democratic club west of the Mississippi. And also our timer has been doing a great job from the Utah League of Women Voters. Let's get right back to the questions. This one will go to Mr. Weinholtz. Medicinal marijuana has been a big issue here in the state of Utah. We had two major bills that were winding through Utah's legislature this last season. Probably Senator Madsen's bill was the most controversial and maybe the best known. What are your thoughts and your opinions on medicinal marijuana? And if something like Senator Madsen's bill were to hit your desk as governor, would you sign it?
I would absolutely sign it. And the reason is there is medical proof that medicinal marijuana does cure and treat certain illnesses, not cure, but treat certain illnesses and conditions. And right now we're depriving people of that treatment. At the same time, irrationally, we don't regulate opioids enough. In Utah, we have far too many Utahns addicted to opioids and are dying from that addiction. And if we had medical cannabis, it would be a much better solution for far more people.
Mr. Cook.
Well, I'm an Oriental medical doctor, and so I'm trained in the use of herbal medicine. And the use of marijuana oil is just an acceptable use of that herb. I would definitely support that. I'm also a cancer survivor, and I'm well connected in the alternative medical community across the country. When I was going through my cancer experience, I had a number of my colleagues who said to me, "You need to be taking marijuana oil." I looked into it, but I found that it was illegal in the state, and I decided against it because I didn't want the stress of being a potential felon. So I think that marijuana is not something we should approve on a recreational basis, but I don't see the medicinal use of marijuana oil as a gateway to moving towards recreational marijuana.
Yes, Mr. Weinholtz.
This is also another example of our legislature not listening to the people. A majority of Utahns were in favor of this, and I remember the quote from Senator Madsen, who said, "If only our legislature was as smart as the people of Utah, we could get results on this," and I agree with him.
Mr. Cook.
Well, the way that we can get the legislature to be as smart as the people of Utah is, frankly, to elect more Democrats.
Let's ask this question. Taxes and onerous regulation. We hear this as a common complaint, especially from business and especially from small business in the state of Utah, which has been called the backbone of the Utah economy and the nation's economy. What would you do as governor regarding lessening some of the regulation and keeping a close eye on the taxation? And Mr. Cook.
Well, as a small business owner, I'm sensitive to those issues. There are times when you wish you didn't have to pay your taxes, and there are times when you're grateful that you can pay your taxes and have money left over. So we have to be sensitive. I think it's important for us to always keep the small business owner in mind, because a lot of the initiatives that occur in this state, a lot of the inventions, a lot of the cutting edge thought comes out of small entrepreneurs. One of the challenges we have, however, is that we sometimes put business ahead of everything else. And we hear over and over again the governor patting himself on the back for making this the #1 business state in the union. At the same time, we're all breathing dirty air, and our education system is underfunded. So we need to be sensitive to business, but I believe there's more we could do to increase the quality of life.
Mr. Weinholtz.
Well, as someone who has started 3 small businesses, and one remained a small business, one became a medium-sized business, and one became a very large business, I can tell you that I am sensitive to these issues as well. But I think the issues for small business are more about too much bureaucracy that they have to go through, not regulation. And just to follow up on what Vaughn said, the governor does tout the fact that we've been voted the best state in the country for business, but those awards are usually given by extremely conservative publications like Forbes magazine, and the main criteria to get on those lists is to have low taxes, low regulation, and low wages. And none of those things help everyday Utahns. Low taxes mean we're constantly underfunding education. Low regulation means we have the dirtiest air in the country and on some days in the world. And low wages mean we have far too many Utahns who are struggling to make ends meet.
I'm going to jump in at this point because we are getting very sensitive on time. There's one question that I would like both of you to address with no rebuttal, and we'll only go 30 seconds on this. What does have to change for the road to the governor's chair or other high public office in the state of Utah to be less of an uphill battle for a Democrat? And for you, Mr. Weinholz, first.
Mm-hmm. Well, to me, it's all about communication, and I have been a strong communicator throughout my 30-year business career. And when I talk about putting people first in business and wanting to do the same thing in government, I think that will energize people, because what I learned in business is when you give people a voice, which people of Utah today feel they don't have a voice, and unfortunately they're correct. But if you give the people a voice and then you can communicate to them that Democrats are more in line with their values, then they will respond to that. They will give feedback to their legislators, and they will respond differently at the voting booth.
Mr. Cook.
It is about communication, and Doug, I appreciate you hosting this and the Democratic women. This is a great step forward, because too often people in Utah look at Democrats as scary and immoral. And they don't realize that because Republicans are so dominant in this state, that their neighbor is probably a Democrat. I tell my friends, the older you get, the more of a Democrat you become. And I'm surprised if you're my age and you haven't registered as a Democrat, because you get wiser and you become more compassionate.
We have just enough time for 1-minute closing statements. And again, thank you to both of our candidates. And because of the flip of the coin, Mr. Cook, you go first.
Thank you. Well, it's time for a change in the state. I think it's time for us to retire our Republican hegemony. It's time for us to retire our Republican governor. I think Gary Herbert has served long and well in the government, but I don't think a third term for him is necessarily going to bring us the kind of vision and forethought that we need. I think that this is a great year to take a step forward, to move into the future, to build on the future, and not be shackled by the good old boys club that keeps us in the past. I'm also happy to announce that Jan Garbett has accepted the opportunity to run as my running mate, Lieutenant Governor for the state. And I invite you all up to the Capitol building at 2 o'clock this afternoon. We'll have a press conference there where we'll be talking about her candidacy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Weinholz.
Well, one of the reasons that I feel I'm the best candidate for governor is that I have a 30-year business track record of success, the last 18 of those here in Utah with CHG Healthcare Services. CHG has grown into a billion-dollar company, which means I know how to deal with large budgets and large organizations. We have over 2,400 employees and about 12,000 doctors who contract with us as well. So I know how to treat large groups of employees. And when I think about the last question you asked about the tough road that Democrats have, despite the fact that I've had success in business, I come from a very blue-collar background, and I worked in a factory till I was nearly 30 years old before I decided to go to night school and get a business degree. And when you're in that position, you find yourself the underdog, and I love being the underdog. I love fighting from that position, and I'm comfortable with it. And that's what it's going to take to beat Gary Herbert.
Mr. Weinholz, thank you. Thank you to both of our candidates. Let's give them a big round of applause as we wrap up our debate today, the gubernatorial Democratic candidates for the governor's chair here in the state of Utah. And again, a big thanks to the Utah Women's Democratic Club for sponsoring our debate today. It is 11:59.